Hi guys, it's Alex here from 3FPC. The podcast. If you're on this channel, you might already know me from the other stuff on 3FPC. This is the channel, my solo channel, where I'm going to be talking about stuff that interests me some more and giving tips on how to get into stuff, which is what today's issue is, which is how to get into comic books, like reading them, not through like comic book movies or anything, just comic books. But speaking of comic book movies, that is a great way to start. But before I get into everything, give you a bit of a history on how I can really give my opinion on this and feel comfortable doing it. And what it is when I was growing up, I had a couple of collected editions growing up of X-Men, Spider-Man, and such. And I had a local comic book shop that was somewhat close. I could get there on a train, but it closed down after a while because comic book shops are very hard businesses to keep open if you don't get enough custom, as is any business. This was unfortunately one of the shops that didn't get any custom. So I had to go years on end without a new comic book, because this is before the time I felt confident shopping online because of all the security issues and being so young and not having cards or anything like that. So I came to uni a couple of years ago, and that gave me access to the local comic book shop, where I was able to go down and buy and talk to the guy who runs it, and able to get back into them. So I've only really got back into them over the past 3 years. The main reason I got back into it is because of comic book movies and because of talking to Tom, who's one of the hosts alongside me of the 3FPC podcast. So anyway, enough of that. We'll start talking about how I'd recommend you get into comic books. So my first starting point would be to the way I kind of started is with trade paperbacks. Now what these are collected issues of all the individual issues that come out every month. They are collected into one book and sold together with all in one thing, and it wraps a whole story arc into one. Now this is good because a lot of people are scared to jump into comic books or a series because they see it's on issue 56 or something, and they're like, oh, I'm way too late to be getting into this. What you gotta understand is comic books have story arcs that don't quite go for as long as a novel. They are normally about 20 issues long, maybe sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. But this is a great way to get into them without feeling like you're jumping into a new part of the story. You can start at the beginning of volume 1, and volume 1 is where they completely revamp stuff. So for example, Green Arrow, this recently the DC universe rebooted under this new 52 title, so all their characters got completely rebooted, and Green Arrow and all the other characters all started back at issue 1, and you got Green Arrow volume 1, and it's all the first lot of Green Arrow comics that came out collected into one, and that's one story arc. Then the second volume came out, that's the second story arc, and they sometimes lead into each other but never mentioned really again. It's kind of like a sequel to a movie, which sounds pretty obvious, but sometimes you have to say these things. So trade paperbacks were one of the ways I got back into it, because it meant that I was able to go back and read some story arcs from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and so on. So that would be one of my biggest tips, is to maybe start with that whilst at the same time going on to the second way of doing it, which is the monthly issues. Now, new comic books come out every month. There's new comic books every week, but every month the second issue or the third issue of the title is released. So new comic days every Wednesday. I wouldn't recommend going into a comic book shop so early on a Wednesday. I'd go in maybe later on Thursday or later, because when the comics arrive, the shops still have to process them and so on. So what this means, if you go into the monthly issues, it means that you can it just means that you can keep up to date on new story arcs. So if you can see online that a new story arc is starting which you're interested in reading, then you can go into your shop, you can pick up the issue, next month pick up the second issue, and that way whilst you're getting caught up on stuff that you might want to get caught up on, such as just before I got back into them, the Avengers versus X-Men storyline kicked off. I just missed that, so I was really interested in reading that, but I didn't want to lag behind on everything else, so I bought the collected edition of the X-Men Avengers versus X-Men, and I started collecting the individual editions of Avengers plus X-Men because they contain no spoilers, but it meant that I could continue the new story. So yeah, that's another way you can do it, and it means you can access a wider range of characters, because trade paperbacks, a fallback on them is that they do take a long time to get out, and so because you've got to wait for every single issue to be released, then collected, then printed, and then re-released together. Whereas with monthly issues, you can just every month you're there, you've got it in your hand, you're out, and you're happy. So my main tip is to do both of those, or combine it. Well, the answer is really to combine all three of these together. But my third and final tip for you is to research artists and writers you might have seen online, such as one of my favourite writers is Alan Moore, who created the Watchmen series, which are brilliant comics. Highly recommended. The movie is amazing, but a lot of people slate it for no reason. Don't believe them. It's a great movie. It's pretty faithful to their comics. But I loved Alan Moore's writing in The Watchmen, so I looked at what else he'd done, and he did V for Vendetta, another great movie based on his work. So I was able to look at the writing he had done, saw I like that, so maybe I like this, and maybe I like this, and then I was able to read most of Alan Moore's work, and then I did the same for other writers, such as I can't remember his name, Dennis O'Neill or something like that. Wrote Green Arrow with Neil Adams. But yeah, so this is another way, because it means that if you like a particular writing style, then that you'll probably like this writer, so you might like his other issues, and that's a great way to get into it. So really combining all these three together. So like Watchmen came out in the 70s or 80s, so I couldn't buy that at the time, obviously. So I had to buy the collected issues, whereas there were other stories still going on, and there are new books being released for the Watchmen called Before Watchmen, which are also almost like trade paperbacks, but they come out kind of every month or two. So I was able to collect all of them and read them, so stay up to date on the new stuff and read the old stuff that I know and love, but I hadn't read firsthand. I'd only read it online. So yeah, that's really it that I can offer tips wise on how to get into comic books. I've been Alex from the Free FPC podcast. Please go check out the Free FPC podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes. We're also on YouTube, where we give our weekly news segment on comic book movies, TV, comics, video games and the such. Please go to our Twitter. If you want to tweet me, I'm on the Free FPC Twitter. I don't have my own because I don't have the effort to make one. So tweet us at Free FPC Podcast. If you want to tweet me personally, just type to Alex after it, and I'll answer it personally. But yeah, that's really it from me. Please go check out Free FPC and like and subscribe my channel. And I shall see you next time.